Alright, so I don't usually tell this one. Not like this, anyway. I've hinted at it, sure, in some of my older videos when I'm talking about how a good story needs to feel real, you know? But I've never actually laid it all out. Because honestly, it's not just a story. It's something that still sits with me, like a pebble in your shoe that you can't quite shake out, no matter how many times you tap your foot. And it happened on Highway 375, out in Nevada, the extraterrestrial highway they call it. We went there looking for a bit of fun, a bit of a laugh, maybe a blurry photo of something weird to show off. We found something alright. Something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it too long. It was late summer, a few years back. I was kind of between gigs, just finished up a project and feeling that restless itch. You know, the one. The kind that makes you want to pack a bag and just drive until the world feels new again. Chloe was feeling it too. She was a graphic designer I'd worked with on a couple of smaller projects, a friend really, but the kind of friend where there's always this hum under the surface. This unspoken thing that she'd mention wanting to see the desert, the big skies. And I, being me, immediately thought, Area 51. Extraterrestrial highway. Just clicked. She agreed, of course. Chloe was always up for an adventure, even if it was just a stupid road trip. She had this way about her, this energy that was both laid back and intensely vibrant. When she showed up at my place that morning, wearing these perfectly faded denim shorts that hugged her hips just right, and a loose-fitting white tank top that still managed to hint at the curve of her breasts, I felt that familiar jolt. Her hair, a cascade of dark, wavy brown, was pulled back in a messy ponytail, but a few strands had escaped, framing her face. And her face, she had these high, almost impossibly flawless cheekbones, and her lips, usually a soft, natural rose, looked a little glossier than usual. Catching the morning light, she caught me staring, and a small, knowing smile played on her mouth, just for a second, before she tossed her duffel bag into the back of my old Subaru Outback. "Ready to chase some aliens, Mark?" she asked, her voice a little husky from just waking up, and I swear I felt it right down to my gut. "Born ready," I managed, trying to sound cool, trying to not let my eyes linger on the way her tank top shifted as she leaned into the car. Her movements were always so fluid, so unself-conscious that it was both alluring and, honestly, a little distracting. The drive through California was fine, just highway miles, a blur of familiar landscapes. We talked, we listened to music, we stopped at a Greasy Spoon diner somewhere in Nevada for lunch. I remember watching her across the table, sunlight catching the delicate curve of her neck as she laughed at something I said. Her calves, toned and shapely, were visible beneath the table, one foot tapping idly. I found myself imagining the feel of her bare skin, the smooth line of her leg, and then I mentally slapped myself. "Focus, Mark. This is Chloe, friend. Road trip buddy. Don't be a creep." It was when we finally hit Highway 375 just past Warm Springs that things started to shift. The road itself is something else. It's just this long, black ribbon cutting through an ocean of scrub brush and rock. Vast, empty, and silent in a way that feels almost unnatural. The sky stretched out forever and impossible blue, and the air was hot and dry, smelling of dust and sage. "Alright, this is it," I said, trying to inject some excitement into my voice, but even then, a sliver of unease had already started to creep in. The sheer emptiness was overwhelming. Chloe leaned forward, pressing her hands against the dashboard. "It's incredible, Mark. So desolate." She turned to me, her eyes wide, reflecting the endless sky. "Think we'll see anything?" "Hopefully something more than tumbleweeds," I joked, but my gaze kept darting to the rearview mirror. It was just the road behind us, stretching to a vanishing point. Nothing. We drove for what felt like hours, the sun slowly dipping towards the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples. The landscape was beautiful, in a harsh, unforgiving way. We passed the occasional mailbox, a sign for a ranch, but no other cars. Not one. It was just us, the road, and the vast, silent desert. Then I saw it. A single headlight, a tiny pinprick of light in my rearview mirror, far back but definitely there. "Finally, another human," Chloe mumbled, having seen it too. "Thought we were the last people on Earth." I nodded, my eyes fixed on the light. It was coming up fast. Too fast, maybe. The desert plays tricks on your eyes, I told myself. Distances are hard to judge. But this light, it just seemed to be devouring the miles. I kept checking. Every few minutes it was closer. No other lights, just that one bright beam. It was unsettling. Most cars have two headlights. Even motorcycles usually have a larger, more distinct beam. This was just one. A perfect piercing point. You know, Chloe said, shifting in her seat, her bare leg brushing against mine as she stretched, that I felt a quick, unwelcome flush spread through me. Her shorts had ridden up slightly, revealing more of her thigh, smooth and tanned. That I forced myself to focus on the road. I read about this. On this highway, people report seeing a single headlight following them, sometimes for miles. Yeah, I heard that too, I said, trying to sound casual, but my grip on the steering wheel tightened. Just a local legend, probably. People get spooked out here. But it wasn't just a legend. The light was right behind us now. So close I could almost feel its glare. I checked my speed. I was doing about 70. This thing was on my bumper. Okay, this is getting weird, Chloe said, her voice lower now, a hint of genuine unease replacing her earlier excitement. She twisted in her seat, trying to get a better look, her top pulling taut across her chest. My eyes flickered to her for a second, then back to the mirror. I'll just pull over, I said, my voice a little strained. Let them pass. I signaled, checked my mirror one last time. The single headlight was still there, blindingly bright, and gently eased the Subaru onto the gravel shoulder. The crunch of the tires was loud in the sudden silence as I brought the car to a stop. And then, nothing. I looked in the rearview mirror, empty. Nothing but the endless road, stretching back into the darkening twilight. No headlight. No car. Just the vast, empty desert. Chloe gasped. What the hell, Mark? I turned to her, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Her face was pale, her lips slightly parted. The confident smile from earlier was gone, replaced by a look of genuine fear. Her hands were pressed against her chest, right where the fabric of her tank top stretched tight. I felt a strange mix of fear and a very inappropriate surge of protectiveness. I don't know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I swear it was right there. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the ticking of the cooling engine. The air outside was growing colder, and the first stars were beginning to pepper the darkening sky. The silence felt heavy, oppressive, like the desert itself was holding its breath. Maybe they turned off? Chloe suggested, her voice shaky. Turned off where? I asked, gesturing to the featureless landscape. There's nothing out here for miles. We drove on, a new tension in the car. The earlier excitement was completely gone, replaced by a watchful, almost paranoid silence. I kept checking my mirrors, my eyes darting from the road ahead to the road behind. Chloe was quiet too, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, but I could tell she was looking for something. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and the desert plunged into an inky blackness, illuminated only by the faint glow of the crescent moon and the millions of stars that seemed to hang so low you could almost touch them. It was beautiful, but also terrifying. Then, about 20 minutes later, it happened again. A single headlight, far back in the distance. My breath caught in my throat. No way, I muttered. Chloe followed my gaze to the mirror, her eyes widened. Mark? It was the same, that single, piercing beam, and it was closing the distance again with that same unnatural speed. This time I didn't say anything. I just watched it, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I could feel the sweat prickling on my back. Chloe was rigid beside me. I could see her chest rising and falling quickly under her top. Her hands were clenched into fists in her lap. The fear radiating off her was almost palpable. And yet, even in that moment of rising dread, my eyes were drawn to the way her dark hair clung to her neck, damp with a fine sheen of sweat, and the delicate curve of her collarbone. It was a stupid, inappropriate thought, and I hated myself for it, but it was there. The light was right behind us again, closer than before, almost touching our bumper. I could feel its heat, its intensity, even though it was just a reflection. It felt malevolent. Pull over, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. Just pull over. I did. Same signal, same gentle ease onto the shoulder, same crunch of gravel, same complete, utter silence. And again the mirror was empty. Nothing. This time, a shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the desert night. It was a cold, creeping dread that settled deep in my bones. This isn't right, Chloe said, her voice shaking now. She turned to me, her eyes huge in the dim light of the dashboard. This is really not right. I couldn't speak that I just stared at the empty road behind us, trying to rationalize it, trying to find some logical explanation. A mirage? Some kind of optical illusion? But we'd both seen it. Twice. And it had vanished both times instantly, completely. We decided to push on to Rachel, the tiny town that's basically the unofficial capital of the extraterrestrial highway. It was still a good hour or so away, but I just wanted to get somewhere, anywhere with other people. The silence in the car was thick, heavy with unspoken fear. We finally pulled into Rachel around 9 o'clock. It's not much of a town. A few houses, a small motel, and the famous Little Ale Inn, a diner and bar known for its alien memorabilia. It was exactly what we needed. Other people. Lights. Noise. As I parked the car, my eyes automatically scanned the road behind us. Nothing. Of course. We practically stumbled into the diner, the smell of fried food and stale beer a welcome assault on our senses after the desolate highway. The place was surprisingly busy for such a remote spot. A mix of tourists, a few locals, and some serious-looking alien enthusiasts. We found a booth in the back, sinking into the worn vinyl seats. Chloe immediately ordered a beer, and I got one too. I needed it. My hands were still a little shaky. So, Chloe said, taking a long sip, her eyes still a bit wide, but a faint flush returning to her cheeks. That was an experience. An experience doesn't quite cover it, I mumbled, running a hand through my hair. I don't understand what that was. Me neither, she admitted, her gaze drifting around the room, taking in the alien posters and the string lights. Her tank top had gotten a little rumpled from the drive, and as she leaned back, the fabric stretched across her chest, the outline of her nipples just visible. I quickly looked away, feeling a fresh wave of guilt. Even now, with that unsettling experience fresh in our minds, my brain was still doing its own thing. It was a weird, uncomfortable feeling, this mix of primal fear and primal desire. It felt wrong, almost disrespectful, to be thinking about her like that when she was clearly still shaken. Our waitress, a woman named Beverly with a no-nonsense demeanor and a faded alien tattoo on her arm, came to take our order. We got burgers and fries, comfort food. While we waited, I pulled out my phone, checking for service. Spotty, as expected. I scrolled through my photos, looking for anything, any clue. Nothing. Unusual. Then, as I was putting my phone away, I saw it. A notification. A new photo had been added to my camera roll. I hadn't taken any photos since this morning. I tapped on it. It was a picture of the back of my Subaru. Taken from behind, from a low angle, and in the very center of the shot, perfectly framed, was that single, blinding headlight. It was so bright it almost obscured the CR. It looked like it was right on our bumper. My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone onto the table with a clatter. Chloe looked up, startled. What is it? I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling, and turned the screen towards her. She stared at it, her face draining of color. No, she whispered. No way, you didn't take this, Mark, did you? I shook my head, unable to speak. I hadn't touched my phone since we pulled over the second time, and even if I had, I wouldn't have taken a picture of the back of my own car with that thing behind it. When was it taken? Chloe asked, her voice barely a breath. I checked the metadata. It said 8:17 p.m. That was roughly the time we pulled over the second time. Exactly when that headlight was right behind us. How? Chloe whispered, her eyes wide, darting from the phone to me, then to the door of the diner, as if expecting something to appear. Her hand reached out, instinctively gripping my arm, her fingers digging into my bicep. Her touch, even in fear, sent a jolt through me. I don't know, I managed, my voice hoarse. I honestly don't know. We ate our burgers in a daze, barely tasting the food. Every time the door of the diner opened, we both flinched, our eyes darting to see who was coming in. There was no one who looked out of place, no one who seemed to be watching us. Just other tourists, other people looking for their own slice of the weird. We decided to get a room at the motel next door. We were too shaken to drive any further, and the thought of being back out on that highway in the dark with that thing was unbearable. The motel was basic, a single row of rooms facing the highway. Our room was clean enough, with 2 double beds, a small bathroom, and a window that looked out onto the empty expanse of the desert. As we unpacked our minimal bags, the tension between us was thick. Not just fear, but something else. The shared terror had stripped away some of the usual social barriers. Chloe was still pale, her movements a little jerky. Her tank top, which she hadn't changed, was now visibly damp around the armpits, clinging to her skin. I found myself watching the way her back muscles flexed as she bent to pull something from her duffel. The subtle sway of her hips that I felt almost predatory, my own internal response to the danger, a primitive urge to connect, to seek comfort, even in such an inappropriate way that I hated it. "You want to shower first?" I asked, my voice a little rougher than I intended. She nodded, not meeting my gaze. Yet I need to feel clean. While she was in the bathroom, I tried to calm my racing thoughts that I pulled out my laptop, thinking maybe I could find something online, some explanation for the headlight, for the photo. Nothing, just more forums filled with anecdotes and theories. The sound of the shower running was a strange comfort, a normal human sound in a situation that felt increasingly surreal. I imagined her in there, the hot water steaming up the small bathroom, running over her skin, washing away the dust of the highway. The image was vivid, and I felt a fresh wave of heat, a flush of desire that was both unwelcome and undeniable. That it was a bizarre, almost grotesque juxtaposition. The fear of the unknown, the unsettling mystery, and this raw, physical longing that it made me feel dirty, somehow, even though it was just in my head. When Chloe emerged, wrapped in a fluffy white motel towel, her hair still dripping wet, she looked different. Her face was scrubbed clean, no makeup, her lips a natural, soft pink. The towel was cinched tightly above her breasts, but it still couldn't hide the curve of her body, the long line of her legs, the delicate ankles. She looked vulnerable and incredibly desirable. "Better?" I asked, my voice a little strained. She nodded, running a hand through her wet hair. "Yet out a bit." She caught me looking, and for a second, her gaze lingered on mine, a strange mix of apprehension and something else I couldn't quite decipher. My heart hammered against my ribs that I felt exposed, as if she could read every inappropriate thought swirling in my head. She quickly broke eye contact, moving to her duffel bag to pull out some clean clothes, a loose-fitting t-shirt and a pair of soft cotton shorts. As she changed, with her back to me, I tried to focus on my laptop screen, but my eyes kept darting to her reflection in the darkened window. The graceful movement of her arms, the brief flash of bare skin as she pulled on her shirt, it was agonizing. We stayed up late, talking in hushed tones, trying to make sense of it all. The single headlight, the vanishing act, the photo that we went over every detail, every possibility. Was it a prank? Some local messing with tourists? But the photo, that was the sticking point. How could someone have taken that photo and put it on my phone? "Maybe it's some kind of glitch?" Chloe suggested, her voice tired. She was curled up on one of the beds, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. Her face, still pale, looked even more delicate in the dim light. "A glitch that perfectly captures a phantom headlight?" I scoffed, but even as I said it, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. We eventually drifted off, exhaustion finally winning over fear. But my sleep was restless, filled with fragmented images of blinding lights and empty roads. I woke up with a start. The room was dark, but a faint light was filtering through the gap in the curtains. My phone was buzzing on the bedside table. I grabbed it, my heart immediately leaping into my throat. It was a message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a single word. "Found." Beneath the word, there was another photo. This one was even more disturbing. It was a picture of Chloe, asleep in her bed, the blanket pulled up to her chin, her dark hair fanned out on the pillow. It was clearly taken from inside the room, from the foot of her bed. My blood ran cold. I sat bolt upright, my eyes darting around the room. The air was still. The door was still latched, the window was closed. Chloe stirred, woken by my sudden movement. "Mark? What's wrong?" she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. She pushed herself up on one elbow, her t-shirt riding up slightly, revealing a sliver of her midriff. Her eyes were still heavy-lidded, but a flicker of alarm was already there. I shoved the phone under her nose, my hand shaking so violently I almost dropped it. "Look." She squinted at the screen, Then her eyes snapped wide open that a strangled gasp escaped her lips. She snatched the phone from me, staring at the image of herself asleep. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh my God, Mark. Who took this?" We both scrambled out of bed, our eyes frantically scanning the room. Nothing. Everything was exactly as we had left it. The terror was a cold, sharp blade twisting in my gut. Someone had been in our room. Someone had watched Chloe sleep, and they had taken a picture. "We need to get out of here," Chloe said, her voice rising, bordering on hysteria. Her hands were pressed against her mouth, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting the unseen photographer to materialize. "Yeah," I agreed, my own voice tight with fear and a fresh surge of rage. Who was this? And how were they doing this? We threw our things into our bags with frantic urgency. My mind was racing, trying to piece it together, the headlight, the vanishing act, the photo on my phone, and now this was no prank. This was something else entirely. Something deeply, terrifyingly personal. As we were about to leave, I noticed something on the small nightstand between our beds. A small, smooth, black stone. It wasn't there last night. I would have seen it. It was perfectly round, perfectly black, and felt strangely warm to the touch. I picked it up, my fingers brushing against the still warm surface. It felt wrong, like it shouldn't exist. "What is that?" Chloe asked, her voice hushed, her eyes fixed on the stone in my hand. "I don't know," I said, dropping it back onto the table as if it had burned me. "It wasn't here." We practically ran out of the motel room, throwing our bags into the back of the Subaru. The sun was just rising, casting long shadows across the desert, but the beauty of it was completely lost on us. All I wanted was to get as far away from Rachel, from Highway 375 as possible. As I started the car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I saw it. A single headlight, far in the distance. A tiny, almost imperceptible pinprick of light. My heart leaped into my throat. I slammed the car into reverse, backed out of the parking spot, and sped out onto the highway, not even bothering to check if anything was behind us. I just needed to go. The drive back was a blur of frantic energy and gnawing fear. We barely spoke, the silence punctuated by my constant glances in the rearview mirror. Every distant light, every flicker on the horizon, made my stomach clench. Chloe sat beside me, rigid, her arms wrapped around herself, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Her hair was still damp, clinging to her temples, and her lips were pressed into a thin, white line. The vulnerability of her profile, the slight tremor in her hands, only intensified that inappropriate internal struggle within me. I wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to pull her close. But the fear, the sheer terror of what we were experiencing, kept me frozen. And the thought of what had been in our room, watching her, taking that picture, it fueled a possessive rage I hadn't known I had. We finally reached the junction with a larger highway, Interstate 93, heading south. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief. We were off 375. We were leaving it behind. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. It clung to us, a suffocating shroud. We drove for another hour, the sun now fully up, casting a harsh glare on the desert. We stopped at a gas station, a big, brightly lit place with a convenience store. I needed coffee, and Chloe needed to use the restroom. As she walked away, her bare legs moving gracefully beneath her shorts, her dark hair swaying with each step, I watched her. Every detail, the curve of her calves, the way her hips moved. It was a desperate attempt to ground myself, to focus on something real, something tangible, amidst the swirling chaos of my fear. But it also felt like a betrayal, a moment of weakness in the face of such terror. I filled the tank, my eyes constantly scanning the parking lot, the road, the people around me. No one seemed out of place. No single headlights. Just normal, mundane life. Chloe came back looking a little more composed, but her eyes were still shadowed. "Ready?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Yeah," I said, but as I turned to get back into the car, I noticed something. Tucked under my windshield wiper, a small piece of paper. My heart seized up again. I grabbed it, my fingers fumbling. It was a photograph. It was a picture of us, Chloe and me, taken just a few minutes ago as she was walking towards the gas station entrance, and I was standing by the pump. It was a candid shot, perfectly in focus. And in the background, far off in the distance, barely visible against the bright morning sky, was a single tiny pinprick of light, like a star that shouldn't be there. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a stalker. This was impossible. How could someone have taken this, printed it, and placed it on my car, all in the span of 5 minutes? Chloe saw my face. "What is it now, Mark?" she asked, her voice tight with dread. That I showed her the photo, she gasped, a small, choked sound, her eyes, wide with terror, scanned the image, then lifted to the distant horizon. "It's still here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's still following us." We got back in the car, our movements jerky, our minds reeling. That I started the engine, my foot heavy on the accelerator. That we needed to get home, that we needed to be safe. But the concept of safety felt like a distant, impossible dream. The rest of the drive was a blur of highway miles, punctuated by our increasingly desperate attempts to rationalize what was happening. We talked about calling the police, but what would we say? A single headlight keeps following us, and someone keeps putting impossible photos on my phone and in our motel room? They'd think we were crazy. That as we got closer to home, the familiar landscapes of California began to appear, but they offered no comfort. The world felt altered, tainted. That we pulled into my driveway late that night, exhausted and emotionally drained. The silence in the car was thick with unspoken fear and the lingering presence of the unknown. I don't know what to say, Chloe," I said, turning off the engine. She just nodded, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Her face was pale, her lips still pressed into a thin line. She looked utterly spent, her shoulders were slumped, and the soft cotton of her shirt clung to her, emphasizing the curve of her back. That I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to offer some comfort, but I felt paralyzed. The terror had created a strange intimacy between us, a shared trauma, but also a barrier. "I'm just glad we're home," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. That we got out of the car, the night air cool and familiar. As I grabbed our bags from the back, I instinctively glanced up at the night sky. No single headlights, just the usual stars. But the feeling of being watched was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. Chloe turned to me, her eyes meeting mine. They were filled with a raw, vulnerable fear and something else, a desperate plea for understanding, for reassurance. That I saw the way her lips trembled slightly, the faint tremor in her hands. That in that moment, all my inappropriate thoughts, all the lustful distractions vanished, replaced by a profound, aching empathy. That I just wanted her to be okay. That I wanted us to be okay. "You want to come in?" I asked, my voice soft. "You don't have to drive back alone tonight." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I'd like that." We went inside, the familiar comfort of my apartment feeling strangely alien. That we didn't talk much. That we just sat on the couch, side by side, the silence a shared burden. Eventually she drifted off, her head resting on my shoulder, her body a warm, comforting weight beside me. That I could feel the gentle rhythm of her breathing, the soft brush of her hair against my cheek. That I didn't move, didn't dare to. I just sat there, staring into the darkness, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I didn't sleep that night. That I just watched the window, listened to every creak and groan of the old building, my mind replaying every detail of the last 2 days, the headlight, the vanishing, the photos, the black stone. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the blinds, I finally felt a flicker of exhaustion, a heavy weight pressing down on me. That I closed my eyes just for a moment. When I opened them again, Chloe was gone, her side of the couch was empty, her duffel bag was gone. That a faint scent of her shampoo lingered in the air, a ghost of her presence. That I shot up, my heart racing. "Chloe?" I called out, my voice raspy. Silence. That I checked the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. Nothing, she was gone. A wave of panic washed over me, cold and sickening. Had she just left? Slipped out while I was dozing? Or had something else, taken her? I ran to the front door. It was locked, just as I'd left it. The chain was on. I looked out the peephole. The street was empty. My car was still in the driveway. Then I saw it. On the small welcome mat just outside my door. Another black stone, perfectly round, perfectly smooth, and radiating a faint, almost imperceptible warmth. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes darted around my apartment. Every shadow now a potential hiding place, every creak a warning. The silence was deafening. I haven't seen Chloe since. I've called, I've texted, I've left voicemails. Nothing, her phone goes straight to voicemail. Her friends haven't heard from her. Her family says she hasn't been home, that it's like she just vanished. The police were no help. They took my statement, looked at the photos on my phone, listened to my rambling story about the headlight and the motel room. They looked at me like I was crazy. They asked if Chloe and I had had an argument. They suggested she might have just wanted to get away for a while. They said they'd keep an eye out, but there was nothing concrete to go on. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Just a missing person and a man telling a story that sounded like a bad sci-fi movie. I still have the black stone. It sits on my desk, a constant, chilling reminder. Sometimes late at night when the house is quiet, I swear I can feel its faint warmth, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. And sometimes when I'm driving, especially at night, on a long empty stretch of road, I glance in my rearview mirror, and for a split second before I can fully register it, before I can even process the impossible clarity of it, I see it. A single headlight, far back. Always there. Always following.